the way that you move and the way that you strategize within workouts in competition, like literally your movement efficiency and how hard should I go here and what should these sets look like, you can jump pages on the leaderboard with that. Good morning, Misfits. You are tuning into a very special edition Misfit podcast. 3/4 of the Goon Squad in the house. In the gooniest of all goon seats is Misfit OG Gabe Garcia, your Misfit Masters programming strategist. So with that said, we have the Semifinals Prep Programming Podcast for Teens and Masters. Why is this podcast all on its own? One, to make sure that we can really, sort of let you guys know what you can expect for the Teens and Masters Semifinals Prep. And also because, surprise, surprise, they changed the season structure once again. And with the timing of this, we need to write a, completely unique to the Teens and Masters program that starts on different dates and ends on different dates to get you through quarterfinals and into semifinals.
They need a little different structure with their programming, but also they're some of the most successful Misfit athletes that kind of walk the earth.
A lot of podiums
and teenagers here. So we wanted to make sure we best set up, based on prior information and what we've learned kind of going through the seasons and what athletes could potentially expect to see. They needed their own special program here. So which is, sort of why we begin to diverge right as the Open is ending and we're moving on into like different athletes, different parts of their competitive season. We got to branch off and we make sure we're setting these athletes up for success because, unfortunately, until they get an in-person semifinal, they're confined within the four walls of the gym. And that kind of dictates a little bit of difference and nuance in their program when compared to maybe the MFT or hatchet athletes that are potentially going to be competing in person at the higher levels of competition.
So like high level overview, this program starts on March 6th. That will still be phase 4 for MFT athletes and hatchet athletes.
Yep.
It's going to be 9 weeks long. It ends the week after the online semifinal. The schedule does change to sort of our competition season schedule, which is 2 on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off. For a lot of people that are really sort of gung-ho on, making it to the semifinals and doing well, that should be Tuesday, Wednesday on, Thursday off, Friday, Saturday, Sunday on, Monday off.
Correct.
But with the, the way the website is structured now, you get a week in advance. If this needs to be, sort of a Monday, Tuesday, rest Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, something like that, that is totally fine. You can make more changes to that and stay on your regular schedule. Just know that Gabe and Sherb wrote this as if you were going to rest after a Wednesday. So, there could be similar movements like on a Wednesday and a Friday, which would be day 2 and day 3. Again, what makes this even more unique is weeks 4 and 8 of this are actual competition weeks.
It's pretty rare that we have a program that has a peaking schedule trying to get an athlete ready for a very specific part of the season. But, oh, wait, on your way to that peaking event, there's a little pit stop here in the middle where we got to get to that next stage first, that quarterfinal. So you're looking at week 4 being kind of your competition, week 4 your online quarterfinal, and then week 8 being your online semifinal. And just like trying to work around that and make sure it made sense, we took the volume that we used to help MFT athletes peak for semifinals, and we just made sure we had a proper adjustment so athletes can continue to progress through the things they need to be doing to get ready for quarterfinals and semifinals, but made sure kind of the things that were getting someone ready for a quarterfinal didn't necessarily interfere with semifinal or so on and so forth, where there's some like jumping ahead or putting the cart before the horse. So kind of, I think we have a very thoughtful progression for how we go through these next 9 weeks. And we want to make sure that we didn't just gloss over quarterfinals and be like, oh yeah, it's in the bag. Because for some of you out there, that's going to be kind of your season, is what you're shooting for, is to do as well as you can with maybe the hopeful of like, maybe not this year I'm going to semifinals, but I'm gonna see how close I can get. I'll still play a long rest of the season. I'll do the semifinal workouts with everybody else later in the phase, but this is kind of where I am. And I want to make sure we're setting athletes up who aren't quite ready to make the leap for semifinals to see how good they can do at quarterfinals with the hope of, a year or 2 from now, maybe you're that person punching your ticket to semifinals and then the CrossFit Games.
So that's the first big question, right? The goal of this is to peak for semifinals.
Yes.
30 people in the world in each division make it to semifinals. So Gabe, on the Masters side, how do you write a program and how do you sort of maneuver? We can explain a little bit. So when we're talking about picks on the Misfit website, basically you're looking at this list of stuff to do, and we are letting you know based on where you're currently at, which pieces you should do. How do we deal with that in the Masters category, Gabe?
Yeah, I think, it's important to note that right before this starts off is the Open, the end of the Open. So it's really jam-packed. So in terms of the setup, I know there are multiple groups here. I wrote all of the pieces included for a Masters semifinal athlete. So that is with the peaking plan at semifinals.
Right.
And so there should be pick all, everything that is.
So if you're planning on making it to semifinals.
Correct.
Yep.
For those who are quarterfinal athletes, quarterfinal hopefuls, that's your Super Bowl. You're going to do just the mandatory, right? And so it'll be pretty straightforward. You just do the mandatory. And for the ADM athletes, the age division modification athletes, those would have select picks based on volume to peak for the semifinals.
Okay.
So the volume between the Masters and the age division modification definitely is different needs there. So they'll have specific picks that would, keep them, primed, but also peak for the right times.
So if you're planning on semifinals, you're going to do everything that's on there each day based on the peaking schedule. If you are quarterfinals is your Super Bowl, there's going to be mandatory pieces, and it's going to be very clear which ones you're supposed to do. And if you have the age division modifications, there are going to be specific instructions for you as well of which ones you do.
Correct.
Teens.
Teens are a similar boat, same idea. We're peaking for the semifinals. So if you think that, you are a semifinalist or a games level athlete, you're going to be doing all the pieces that you see kind of each day with the, thoughtful intention here of that you're not going to be doing 15 pieces a day. Most days are somewhere between 4 and 6 pieces total, and there are a variety of categories like you're used to seeing on the website. But if you are a quarterfinal athlete, we're going to do more of an a la carte style, meaning that you can see from the varying 1 through 6 pieces, the 3 or 4 that make the most sense for you to try to make that push to try to close the gap with whatever time is remaining. Because while there isn't a tremendous amount of time, if you haven't been doing your homework all season, you're not going to be able to do this one phase and make yourself a games athlete, but you can put the finishing touches on, hey, I've really, really liked the progression of toes to bar throughout the season, or I really want to see where my cleaning jerk can be by the end of this phase, because I think that's going to be the lift that comes up kind of tested for us this year. Can I make sure I'm picking the things that I think need the biggest need for me, and I make sure I'm addressing those, because it's really easy to fall in the trap of just doing everything. Yeah. But if you haven't kind of earned the right, you haven't got to that training age where that's appropriate, all that is just more for the sake of doing more and not actually good training here. So we want to make sure that we're setting you up with proper guidance. So if you are that quarterfinalist athlete where you think that you're maybe a couple seasons away from being able to punch your ticket to the CrossFit Games, that you're doing an appropriate amount of volume and it's actually servicing the needs that you have, as opposed to just, hey, everybody's doing it, so I might as well follow along with them.
We've said the word peaking. I don't know, Ted, what's the counter at? 314 times so far. Let's make sure that people know what that means. At Misfit Athletics, we have sort of tweaked this over the last decade to look at what an athlete needs going into a competition, especially with the volume that we're about to see. That's a really important thing, to prepare yourself to attack sort of exactly what you're asked to do, as opposed to it's competition season, let's murder everybody with volume, or let's only go super long, or you know what I mean? So with the peaking schedule, what we're looking at is we start with pretty low volume at the very beginning, and we go hard, and we really get back into that mindset of, I might have one conditioning piece today, and you better believe I'm going to warm up the right way. I'm really going to think about the strategy of the workout. I'm going to attack it really hard. I'm going to get my post-workout nutritious, all of these things that go into sort of what we call going pro. That's what we do at the beginning. And then we do get to peak volume in the middle, but it's just one extra piece here and one extra lift here. And as you add these things slowly going up into those middle weeks, it's really possible to maintain that mindset of, this is how I do it. I'm only adding it one more lift today, so I got to have the same warm up for that lift as I had for the other one. I got to activate, and I got to mobilize, and I got to cool down. I got to do all of these things. And then we go back down. So we've sort of gotten the intensity. We've gotten intensity with volume, really asking a lot of our athletes in the middle. And then when we go back down, we fine tune, and we are ready to it does not matter what you throw at me. I'm going in on it, and I'm going hard. And again, this is something that we've used for a very long time. A lot of games athletes, and then teens and masters. I mean, that's one of those things where it's like proud papa moments. Weird to say to Gabe. He's a little bit older than me.
It's a weird family you guys
but just when we have these philosophies at Misfit Athletics, and then the teens and masters are written by somebody else, and then we go and we see those people stand on the podium, it speaks for itself. It's just the kind of thing where we're able to really translate these concepts, but put them into the hands of people who are in a different situation, and they've sort of got those different tweaks to it. So these programs produce CrossFit Games podium athletes.
Yeah, and I really like the concept of adding a little bit at a time, because again, when an athlete gets thrown, let's say week one is, I don't know, let's say it's 20 training pieces total across the entire week. If you go from 20 in week one to like 40 in week two, while that might create the shock to the system, everyone's like, you really need to like dump it on them and really like overreach there. What does that athlete do come weeks 5, 6, 7 when they're, feeling the bumps and bruises, and that, we basically overextended an athlete too far. And I do think that this time of year, we've heard stories of other athletes like basically taking too big of a bite leading up to their competitive season, and then being like, I peaked like halfway through my training for this event, before the event, and I went to the event just feeling so run down and beat up that I couldn't perform the way I would.
It sucks so bad to see in person.
Yeah, exactly.
When
you know that
that's
athlete works hard, and they just flounder on the floor, and you're like, I don't understand. Like, you have these Metcon times, you see these videos leading up to about their training and how they're doing, and then when they go to the floor, they've just been like run over by a Mack truck 85 times, and they just can't perform anymore. So like, I really do think that the way we peak athletes for competition season is the best out there. And, hopefully our athletes show out and feel the same way. And that's the feedback we get from every athlete at the end of the season. It's like, at first when we start that march up the hill, it feels like a lot, but when we come back down the hill and I'm ready to rock at the event, like I knew that was the right choice. And that's, that just further validates our opinion on the stance of like, hey, well, we need to take you there and put you a little overextended at some point on your way up the mountain. When you come back down the mountain and go to your event and you're fucking ready to rock, like we did that correct. And you guys did a nice job executing on that plan.
One hallmark of doing that right is at least one athlete per program will say, oh, that was Hell Week, because we took them on a sort of a thoughtful journey to get to that point. And if you had given them that week as week one, they would be potentially hurt, run down, I hate you, I can't do this, the whole nine. Yeah. So there's usually at least one person that was like, wow, that was Hell Week, really? Like, are you sure? I'm like, you did 2 lifts, 3 conditioning pieces. You did however many hours on Maffetone. Like, that is the hallmark of we've overreached, but not just, I don't know, just beating people up for no reason makes no sense.
Yeah, just a thoughtful march that makes sense to them, and it makes sure that they can kind of realistically take those leaps. Because again, I think while sometimes it's cool to have like the shock and awe of like, look at this piece, or look how much volume I had to do, like those same people were like, look at this one single thing, aren't the same people that you see standing on the podium at the end of the weekend at their event, because they were ready for it. Those are the people that are like, remember that thruster workout I did? And it's like, yeah, man, that was cool 3 weeks ago when nothing mattered. And this is actually when it matters. So, proof of concept is good for us. And we see athletes doing well each season, which is, proof to us that we are on the right path here.
All right. So there is more nuance to a peaking schedule, but we're about to talk about all of it in the most detail ever. Lifting. We have the peaking lifts. You might be able to guess what they're going to be. There's a couple of lifts in this sport. If you don't use it, you lose it. And sure, what?
Come on, it's the clean and jerk and the snatch. Like we know those are the 2 things that are most likely to be tested. And yeah, you could make the argument of the 4 rep max front squat and the bench press from other competitions, but typically in our sport, those are the most tested lifts in our sports. We want to make sure that you are properly prepared, and we're essentially peaking both of those lifts, which is unique because we normally follow our program. We kind of highlight one single lift as like our peaking lift, but because we are in this type of part of the year where we can't really guess what's coming, we're basically want to make sure that both of those like axes are sharp. Like you're ready for both a heavy clean and jerk if it gets thrown at you. You get that fun little wall ball ladder with some clean and jerk at the end, which was, that test was gnarly.
Whoever wrote that chose violence.
Or they decide to throw, an ever ascending snatch ladder like they used to do with the double under toe to bar and heavy snatches. Like, it doesn't matter which one's coming up. You're kind of ready for either. And, have had really good feedback with the style of lifting that we've been doing recently, where you kind of hit that like peaking heavy single ahead, and then you do your normal 6x3, 7x2, 8x1, and then you go back down. You kind of hit one for your nice clean set of like 3 or 4, whatever the rep is, and the feedback there is that athletes love the fact that they kind of use the heavy one to prep themselves for the session. They get the meat and potatoes done because they went heavier. That barbell hopefully feels a little bit lighter and a little bit faster. And then they end on a set where like, you know what? Even if I had some sketchy reps in the middle of my 7x3 or 6x2, whatever it is, I could still end on a really clean set. And I can be proud that like I didn't just end my session with my potentially worst triplet of the day. I actually end with a really solid triplet, and then we just build on that every single week. We get a little
triple.
Sorry,
like hopefully you didn't do 2 triplets during the lifting session.
Yeah, what I mean there is that like we end on a really clean set of 3, so that you're proud of that fact, and then you can really go, all right, if something started to break down somewhere in the middle there, like what can I take from that and then apply it to a lighter barbell where I can actually clean things back up?
Is there nuance within the peaking schedules lifting wise for the snatch and the clean and jerk between teens and masters?
I mean, I think just what was the same that was described there fits perfectly for the Masters. So not really. I mean, it's
the funny thing too is the lines have been blurred a bit. Like there's everybody is so good.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, every year they're testing it in some form or fashion, and that typically sets you up the way that those sessions are structured to do what you would do in one of those sessions. Let's say that was the test at a quarterfinal, semifinal. You're gonna probably prime to a heavier lift and then lift at whatever the prescribed weight is, and so it really sets you up nicely for that. And for masters, I mean, depending on the age, you're not really looking to even throughout the year to add 20 pounds to a lift or anything. It's about execution. It's about
refining. Refining.
That's the beauty of percentage work, right? It's your percentage.
Correct.
It's personalized for you within that way already. So we have those 2 lifts within the peaking schedule. And then we have what we refer to internally as a GPP rotation with the other lifts. What that means is athletes are going to be subjected to both high CNS, so the peaking style, really heavy, high rep, speed work, technical work, like going in and refining skills, and those lifts are going to rotate through. And that does a bunch of different things. That sets an athlete up to be ready for different scenarios, right? So we're not going to,
he was just talking about.
Yeah, we're not going to guess where this lift is going to come up. Is it going to be a high rep deadlift? A lot of these speed sessions, you're looking at 30 deadlifts, that you're really sort of bringing the energy to. Is it going to be less reps and heavier? Are you going to need to really call on your skills within some of the movements because we run really nasty interference with something else? You got to go overhead and they're making you do handstand push-ups, or your grip is absolutely shot and they're asking you to clean or snatch, those sorts of things. So basically we rotate through these lifts and you're given different scenarios for each lift. That way we move adaptation and we show you what you're capable of in different settings. The only other thing that I want to bring up with the rotation is the peaking schedule itself. Just certain lifts will pop up at different times based on how many lifts you have. And I think that's where there is a little bit more nuance between the teens and masters. I don't know if you want to go over just the, sort of the structure.
Yeah, just like the lifting, for example. So on the clean and jerk, you're all going to alternate that with weeks of just cleaning as well, because sometimes that can be the linchpin in the problem why you're not advancing is that, you can jerk a house, but you can't get the bar on your shoulders. Maybe the opportunity to clean a bit more and have that be as a singular focus. And we're going to augment, some of that like leg and arm strength with some lunges and some shoulder to overhead, kind of like cycling the barbell, kind of maybe smelling what's on the trail here of like that year where they had the muscle ups and the heavy shoulder to overhead with the 185, and that like threw a lot of athletes for a loop. So it's an opportunity to kind of get comfortable with the fact that you might have to cycle a heavier barbell for some higher reps. And then, one of the things that I think threw a lot of athletes for a loop there was last year's rowing bench press workout, and like not feeling they had got enough reps of bench press in ahead of the competition season. So we made sure that we sprinkled in some strength sessions on the bench, specifically both muscle endurance based. So if they ask you to do 30, 20, 10 bench press again, you're ready for that. But also, hey, you know what? Maybe they call for a 4 rep max bench press. You're ready for that as well. And then, because again, we're kind of inside the 4 walls of the gym. Some of the other things, like you're probably not going to see a sandbag. You're not going to see a log clean. So like what could we see instead? the overhead squat could be very realistic for them to ask of. Like, they might ask you for a 3 rep max overhead squat, or they might ask you to do, max reps at a weight that you haven't done before in a actual workout. You might have done it like a lifting session, like a 5x3, but you never put that together in a 15 reps in the middle of a chipper kind of vibe. So the opportunity to kind of hit some of those lifts that we do kind of sprinkle in throughout the season as kind of auxiliary lifts that kind of augment other main lifts, they could very well be tested in this period here. So we made sure that we had a few weeks of, bench press and overhead squat, just to make sure that you haven't felt like the last time you bench pressed was last time they asked you to do it last semifinal. You're actually ready for that.
All right, Misfits, just a quick break to shout out our show sponsors and maybe get you a little bit more ready to perform during your semifinals prep and into semifinals. You can head to properfuel.co and use the code word MISFIT on the type of supplement stack that will make sure that you are good to go both during your prep and into semifinals. We have Proper Hydrate. If you cannot get your core temperature down post-workout, if you cannot head into the workouts with the adequate sodium levels, you're going to have completely different results. We got Proper Pre, both stim-free and with caffeine. So maybe you're doing the semifinals workout, number 1 in the morning, you got to get nice and jazzed up. Maybe you're doing number 2 in the afternoon and you want to go in and, maybe double dip on that pre-workout, but you want to be able to go to sleep because guess what? You got to wake up again and work out the next day. And then obviously, if we are going to attack this level of volume sort of in the middle of the peaking phase, and if we're going to ask ourselves to go really hard in semifinals, 4, 5, 6 times, we have to be able to recover quickly. And that is exactly what Proper Recover is designed for. It is an all-in-one post-workout nutrition solution. And again, you can head to properfuel.co, use the code word MISFIT to save. All right, back to the show.
I mean, in terms of the Masters, I think the biggest things that I wanted to kind of point out, some of the feedback that I've got throughout the season, especially, speaking on last year's rowing and bench workout, was one like, oh, man, I haven't benched that much since 1967 when I was a freshman in college.
Was that Kern?
No, it wasn't. I think
he benches every day. Like every week. Yeah, he bench presses every single day.
He does not look like
he never benches, and he's the best humanly possible.
I've seen his numbers. It's crazy.
But we've done it over the last, especially in the last cycle or last phase, and people are just talking about how much better they feel about their jerks and things like that.
Yep.
And it's really proving to be that necessary accessory strength work for Masters. That is like, and then you think about people like Boz and all the team that he would choose to program workouts. I bet you that he's got his steady rotation year round of bench, things like that. So it's like, it makes sense. We read the cues and then we hear the feedback with the Masters that this is really helpful, not in a sense that we need to overdo the volume and have you walking around like this,
right?
But as it fits into the program to help accessorize what you're doing. And so I think it's going to be, it's going to set people up to not be in shock if that does come up. Let's say it's a big, like a 30-20-10 or, a Linda, something like that. Like,
oh yeah. And with something like a bench press, and this applies to basically everything, the joke of if you don't use it, you lose it. There's also the side of that where it's like, we just cracked a joke about Mike Kern. He doesn't need to bench all that often. But if you give an athlete something that they haven't been doing at all, and they have to figure out the perfect strategy, and we're talking about seconds and reps and how far you can fall down the leaderboard just from not knowing what it's like to do something. It's not even as much about the training stimulus as it is, I experienced this, I know what it is. Now I can go in and say, okay, it's probably harder if we add rowing. So what does that mean? What do my sets need to look like? How long do I need to rest? All kinds of stuff like that.
Last year, just thinking back to the conversations I had with Sophie and Jenna and Roy about this, that was like a big part of this. It's like, how are you going to break this up? And do you know what the strategy is? And like, there was a little bit of like lack of education there because they hadn't done enough workouts with bench press in it. So a big focal point for the season was like, hey, when you get an opportunity to bench, like learn from this and take very detailed notes so that when it comes up, it doesn't surprise you again. And the feedback I've gotten from all of them is like, hey, I'm able to do this now. And I feel significantly more confident because it basically put a magnifying glass on something I hadn't done. And that's kind of what the test when you go and talk about the CrossFit Games or regionals or sanctionals or semifinals, whatever they are anymore, they put a magnifying glass on the things that athletes haven't been doing. It's the same reason why we saw the dumbbell become a feature of like 2017. It was like, you know what no one's doing? Dumbbell stuff. Know what we're going to do? only dumbbell stuff. Hopefully you've been doing your homework, and that then educated the rest of the field to be like, hey, you know what? All those times I've done barbell thrusters, I should do it somewhat often. I should do dumbbell thrusters. And it just becomes an educational piece. And that's something that we try to take internally very seriously here. If there are patterns or things being laid out for us, it's kind of like breadcrumbs on a trail. We have to follow those things to best set you up for the, to compete at your highest level.
Now we move on to Metcons and intervals and all that good stuff. One of the biggest differences between our peaking type schedule and other programs is Metcon resets. What is a Metcon reset? So Gabe or Sherb would write a workout and it would be just like a normal Metcon. 5 rounds of 10 of these, 15 of these, 10 of those. What we do is we say, okay, this is the beginning of a peaking schedule. How hard would the athlete go in semifinals? So in a competition setting, how do you ask an athlete to know all of this information about their workout and all that good stuff when they're, sort of effort and speed and eggs in the basket, and I'm either gaming this workout or I'm trying to get the right stimulus? How do we connect those things? So what we do is we say, at what point in this workout do you think the athlete could no longer go competition speed in week 1? So let's just make it super easy as an example. You would say they're going to do 3 rounds of this workout, rest 30 seconds, do 1 round of this workout, rest 30 seconds, do 1 round of this workout. We are not asking you to turn this into interval style training. We're saying, I want competition speed of what this looks like written as one piece. We're going to go through that and we're going to get really used to our competition speed. And we do Metcon resets during the part up the mountain. And again, what that does is it really sets the tone for, we don't even really kind of want you to be that good yet. Like, we want you to be, really getting close to that in the middle. And then we're going to rip the rest out on the way back down. And you're going to do these workouts and you're really going to get to the point where you are doing competition speed because you have been the whole time. You're just asking yourself for a little bit more.
It's funny is like while you were speaking about that, I was thinking about the clip that we had seen on Instagram about people talking about zone 2 and like how it trains someone to kind of go slow. Well, this is actually the opposite here. Like, we're trying to flex the muscle of like, here's game speed. Let's train game speed ahead of being maybe ready to do that actual speed for the entire body of work. Let's chunk it out so we can actually go at game speed so that and you can sort of feel what that feels like. Everyone knows when they're in really good shape what like a burpee muscle up workout feels like, and they know that in that same workout a little bit out of shape what that workout feels like. And like, we want to train that muscle or that gear when you're actually at your fittest to be like, all right, this is what that pace is. And now, because there's a little bit of rest, I can kind of, that carrot is sort of dangled in front of me and I can kind of flex that muscle. And then by the end of the phase, like, I don't need that anymore because I've actually put the body in of work and where my axe is as sharp as it's going to be. And I can go that speed the entire time.
So we have more nuance though. Quarterfinals is week 4. You're telling me I'm not going to do any Metcons from week 1 to week 4? Does that make sense?
Well, this is something Gabe and I spoke out quite a bit, going back and forth talking about the programming is, we do think that Metcon resets are one of the best ways to set an athlete up to go game speed, but it would be silly of us to have no Metcons for the entire kind of first 5 weeks, kind of getting us through quarterfinals and that week after, kind of like that march up the hill. So the way you're going to see it now is you're going to have mainly Metcon resets through week 5, but you will always have at least 1 Metcon per week so you can practice. This is something that you and I have talked about a little bit because I have a lot of Metcon resets in my programming. And it's like every once in a while, it's nice to be thrown. Just here's a Metcon and let's see if you can take all that work you've been putting in your Metcon resets and apply it to when it's just a Metcon. So we want you to use the information you kind of figured out in your Metcon resets and see how close you can be in intensity and focus and drive on it's just straight up Metcon.
If you treated them like intervals, especially the kind of intervals where you sort of expect yourself to go slower as you go, it will not go well on the backside of it. So again, it's really important to think about it as like the best version of myself. What could that person do when I'm at peak fitness? What could I hold here? And that's when you can start to get feedback mid-workout. If I hold 900 calories per hour on the rower and then have to jump up and do a set of 5 muscle ups with a quick transition, can I do that? Does that make any sense for me? And that's where I want to be in X amount of weeks. So again, the reason I said that is you made me think of it when you talked about we're not training to go slower.
Yes.
Interval style training in the wrong hands can go slower because you just feel 3 rounds of this,
So much
2
rest.
rounds,
Look at all that
1
rest.
round, AMRAP 2 minutes. Like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
So again, really making sure that you're still understanding that it is a Metcon. You just get some what Hunter calls nuisance rest in there. The kind of thing where if you really looked at the clock and your chalking breaks and your hands on your knees and all that stuff. The funny thing though is psychologically it hits different. You see the same athlete that rests too much in a workout and
it's funny you mentioned that.
They love it in the reset.
Working with Kern this year, I've actually had the opportunity to see, to explain some of these concepts and have him go through some of these concepts. And with the Metcon reset, I actually think it's going to help him take feedback on not going out too hot to start a workout. Cause he has that problem of not like sending it a little bit early, this is this many rounds. And so when he sees this, the instruction is almost going to be, okay, look at this as a bigger piece. And he often tells me, man, I got, 2-3 rounds into it. And I went, oh shit, I shouldn't have gone so fast. And so if that happens, he thinks in a quarterfinal, semifinals, man, I got to redo this workout, Yeah. But no, there's a little break in there for you to reset and say, hey, what happened here? Was I going out too hot? Let's zone it back in, get right to the pace that I need to get through the rest of this piece. And so that feedback is huge. And it's funny that I pick on Kern, but a lot of masters that I work with develop those habits early on and have been doing them so long that this is the type of training that is absolutely essential and really valuable for their
just feels old school to me. It doesn't surprise me at all because you used to have the open workout and it was like your entire season rode on those 5 workouts. And if you don't have your absolute best perfect execution of that workout, well, fuck, you saw people doing that workout 3-4 times in a 5-day span because they're like, I didn't do it yet. And we just think about like now as programmers and as like, kind of past that part for most of our like careers here. It's like how much training was lost because you decided to do that over and over again. And like how those silly mistakes are obviously things you learn from. That's how anyone learns anything is like trial and error. But it's just funny to hear that because I can definitely relate to the old school mentality of the open being the biggest thing on the calendar. And now like it's not as big a deal anymore. And we have the opportunity to learn from that behavior and how we can actually do better now as opposed to continue to repeat the same mistake.
The funny thing is the very first ever open workout. So that's as old school as you can get. The web CrossFit's games.crossfit.com broke. It didn't work. So week 1 was 2 weeks long.
Oh yeah.
I thought I was a competitor and my affiliate was in my house. I don't want to tell you how many times I did 11.1, but I can tell you it was.
How many double unders you do in that 2-week span, you think?
Well, luckily my capacity wasn't luckily, quote unquote.
Save me.
But like if I didn't have a judge, I was breaking out the like old Canon cameras, like 6 feet wide. My dad was there with a camcorder, with the dangling lens cap.
Yeah.
Like, if you're an OG and you were serious back then, you remember what that was like. We're talking every other day for 2 weeks or twice in one day. Not good. Obviously, from a general standpoint, Metcons and intervals, you got couplets, you got triplets, you got chippers, you got AMRAPs, you got rounds per time, you've got 21, whatever. Like we're going in and it's CrossFit season, so we're doing CrossFit.
Yeah, and again, most of the things that you'll see within the programming are going to be the things that you can normally find within the 4 walls of your gym. We do sprinkle in things like sandbag cleans and step overs and things that you might not necessarily have in the programming when it gets time to be tested, but like that's variance. But for the most part, you're going to be seeing the things that you can kind of expect to come down the pike when it comes to movements and styles and stimuli, the things that you're used to doing year round with us. We just try to have a slight emphasis on the things that you could potentially see within the 4 walls of the gym because that's our competition season until we do the CrossFit Games is within the 4 walls of the gym.
I'm going to try not to use the B word if I'm talking to 14-year-olds. Monostructural work that we have here. We have a special name for that. Hopefully you know what it is. We have a row bias.
Yes.
You guys don't get to use anything else other than, your body, or a jump rope or a box or that sort of thing. So talk to me a little bit about the difference between, if you're prepping for a regular comp and what online semifinals is like.
It's a very good chance you could see something like a skier or an air runner or a C2 bike. Those are all things within the the realm of possibility if you go to an in-person semifinal or like a torque tank, things that could potentially not be at your affiliate. However, because you're in the four walls of the gym and they give us an equipment list for online competitions, rower is the only machine that made it in there. So we wanted to make sure there's a good dose there between all the math work that you're going to have throughout the entire phase. You're going to have plenty of aerobic pieces that are probably a notch below the volume you see in like a math session, but still put you on a machine for a long period in case they ask you to do a 2K row and 80 bar facing burpees. You know exactly kind of what your 6, 7, 8 minute paces are. And then we just want to make sure you have that gear kind of in tune if you get thrown the final that the individuals got in quarterfinals last year, the row calories, burpee box jump overs, and power snatches. So we're just basically making sure that regardless of the time domain and rowing, that you feel like you've got enough data collected and enough stimuli in that machine so that it's not a surprise to you. You don't have any idea what your 2-minute gear is versus your 4-minute gear, your 8-minute gear versus your 15-minute gear. We want you ready for all of that. So that's kind of what we mean when we say bias, is that we want to make sure that like all the potential time domains and styles where you could see rowing, you've kind of figured out what that gear is ahead of the competition season. And again, just because that's going to be the main machine in your programming, that doesn't mean you won't see things like C2 bikes and ski ergs. You just won't see them at the same level.
Stimulus is king when you're training, right?
You won't see them at the same level you see maybe in the MFT programming, but the same idea. It's to create variance when we have those machines. And again, we talk about this in other podcasts. The idea behind a machine is that you can work an energy system devoid of a lot of skill that might prevent you from getting the intended stimulus. So you're going to be doing plenty of rowing. You're just going to have rowing kind of catered to what you could potentially see in your event. And then the other weeks are just kind of like, hey, I know your hands are probably blistered from hanging onto the rower handle and your ass is probably chafed from sitting on the seat. So let's do something a little bit different that can kind of also build those energy systems. It's also return of my favorite style of bitch work just because it breaks things up. Cardio, monostructural work. Edit that out. Oh, it's funny. It's like you said that, Drew, is like I remember writing the programming last
the B word's banana, by the way.
Yeah, banana.
Banana work.
Instead of like
that doesn't sound good either. Sorry.
Metcon, interval, and then that work, I would say conditioning 1, 2, and 3 is like this feels safer. But the return of CrossFit monostructural work just means the lower skill movements that often can be a cog in the wheel. So like wall balls and burpees and shuttle runs and step overs, things that, are lower skill, but are just basically how hard you want to work. Those are injected in places that make a lot of sense for you to get, again, data collected on those things and knowing how your body responds if they slam together burpee box jump overs and wall balls and what that combination feels like. So basically the whole point behind any phase that we do here, specifically this phase, is trying to guess ahead potentially what the combinations could be. And do you have enough data to know if you have to leave shuttle runs and go right into muscle ups or go right into wall balls, like what that pace has to be like so you have success there and you're not just guessing on the day. We want you to know almost the answers to the test ahead of the test.
We appreciate you guys thinking that we can guess every
No, we can.
every competition workout ever. It is called variance. And if you haven't done the combination, there aren't that many combinations, you know what I mean? So if you've gone a really long time and you haven't done that combination, well, maybe we can guess all the workouts. And you should head to misfitathletics.com and start working there. So the other category that we have here that we haven't talked about yet is the skill work. And
before we move on to that,
yes,
I have to put a special plug in for the MOF work for Masters.
Okay.
Throughout the year, it's been a little bit less than the other programs have been doing.
Yep.
I think it's absolutely essential through this 9 weeks to do what is put out in front of you in terms of the MOF work, because of as you start to do a little bit more volume and things like that, I think it's really going to go a long way into your recovery, your ability to stay calm throughout the increased volume, that type of thing. So really pay attention to the MOF work, even if you haven't prioritized it before. It's going to show up on days where you're also training, and I have sort of pulled that out to the program in the year to prioritize, the limited time with whatever it is, work and kids. It's really important to work that in, whether that means you have to get up in the morning and do it early.
We get to certain points in the season where you got to figure it out. You absolutely have to figure it out. For anybody new to the program, Gabe is talking about heart rate based sort of long, slow work. So make sure that you have access to or order yourself a heart rate monitor. So you're ready to go in and do that stuff. So skill work. Once again, if you're new to Misfit Athletics, we're looking at this cross section of sort of getting better at a movement, but it's like strength. It's written sort of like strength work, for, you know, your muscle ups and your handstand push-ups and different movements like that. And at this point in the year, it's just really important to understand that, yes, we need to get better. We need to build capacity. We need to improve on efficiency and our skill. But I think a lot of what Gabe did within this was making sure that different scenarios were present, because this has to translate to the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just in general, one of the things that I took feedback from after the games from Misfit athletes was the ability to do bigger sets. And I know we put that in a little bit last year, but there's definitely your opportunity to practice bigger sets on skill work like muscle ups, you know, bar pull, you know, handstand push-ups, that type of thing. But also the scenarios of, okay, I'm in a Metcon and I need to, that's, you know, a big set and I need to, or multiple rounds of bigger sets, 20 or so, I need to break this into a 5-4-3 or a 6-5-4.
Yep.
You'll have the ability to do that as well. So I think it's really going to set folks up to apply that in what you're going to be asked to, what you're going to be tested on. So
what are the ones that we're going to hammer on more, and what are the, like, because basically when we're looking at a competition schedule and we're going into skill, we're going to put the asterisk on a few of these movements and say, these need to show up basically every week, pretty close to that.
Yep.
And then the other ones where we know we can sort of get a lot of bang for our buck in a single session. And those are potentially alternating weeks, you know, every other week, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So the main ones are going to be muscle ups, bar pull. So that's chest to bar and bar muscle ups, and then handstand push-ups. Those are the ones that without a doubt, you're going to see in some form or fashion. And you definitely need to put a regular routine work. And
part of that too is central nervous system, right? Like, it's kind of hard to, like, you can do those every week. There are some movements that if you do too often, it's going to be a problem. It's going to mess with the rest of your programming. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things I do want to put on with things like muscle ups and bar pull, that definitely is something I hear feedback with masters a little bit more. So I was try to be thoughtful all throughout the year, but especially in this time point, that, you know, it cannot get to a point where for the next 3 days you're like, oh, my elbows, my shoulders, my this, my that, and interferes with the rest of your training.
Right.
So it's that fine balance of getting the opportunity to prepare and to get a lot of that out of that session, but without impacting everything else that you're
another
doing.
Perk of the peaking schedule, right?
Exactly.
Like, if you're going to go in and you're going to start to, you know, chip away at some bigger sets in something like a muscle up without 2 or 3 lifts and without 2 or 3 conditioning pieces, you have your volume is also linear progression, not just the movements themselves. So right. what's the rest of what is sort of the category outside of those main 3? So
beyond those, we have toes to bar, which is definitely something that has challenged a few of our folks. So you'll get plenty of work on the toes to bar. You get rope climbs, and that one, we talked about rope climbs here, in that legless rope climbs are going to be included there. So based on last year, no legless rope climbs are fair game for everybody. I know they just adjust the height for the age division modification.
Yep.
So you get practice at that. And then the dumbbell overhead walking lunge is something that we thought we would get a lot of bang for our buck there in terms of stability overhead, the new movement, the skill building. So you're going to get a chance to do the single overhead walking lunge, and then the regional style with the one overhead and the other on the shoulder. And lastly is pistols. So you get pistol work that typically rears its head in quarterfinals or semifinals. So.
Yep. On the lunges, I mean, honestly, this is for the pistols too, but specifically for the lunges, I've got some athletes who are, CrossFit Games athletes, best of the best, and struggle with these movements, right? It's very much a mobility based movement. And one of the things that you can do to really improve yourself, and this is getting sort of specific, but, get into the bottom of a lunge with your knee on the floor and get the dumbbell, a single dumbbell, up into place and do some pressing from that position to get in there and really understand the balance point of where you're supposed to be at, because the dumbbell overhead lunge, or honestly any overhead lunge, can be based on ankle, knee, hip. You know, is your midline sticky, thoracic spine? Is it actually your shoulder where you need to work on your lat? So when we do these movements, you know, sort of as prep, we can do the old school sort of K-Star test retest model when it comes to your mobility and the things that actually make a difference for you. Like, you can come in, like, you know, when I was still pretty serious about training CrossFit style movements, like even someone like me who was super serious about mobility, come in on a certain day and it's like, woof, like you did something that's really pinned down your lat or your trap or whatever, and it's hard to get into that position. And that's when that test retest model means everything. You put yourself in a position, you try to figure out what's wrong, and then you have that mobilization, or, you know, you're doing the sort of ART where someone's helping you with your mobility, you foam, whatever it is. And then you go back into the position. You're like, that is what it is. It is actually my hip. And then you can zero in on hip mobility each time that you do that. So I just want to say, with those movements, if you get really discouraged, you don't really want to practice them, or you're using like a 1 pound dumbbell or something like that for your skill work, that test retest model is everything, because you need to pinpoint what's actually holding you down. And that is going to be person to person. It's going to be different for everybody.
All you're saying here is it's not a checkbox. We don't want you to get to the end of your session and be like, I got some muscle ups to do. Let's hop on the rings. Like, treat the muscle ups the same way you would treat an open workout. Like, you're getting ready to do an open workout. You're thinking about every single muscle fiber being in the perfect position, nice and warm and ready to go. And like, those perfect people at your gym that need to take 45 minutes to 2 hours to get ready to do an open workout. Like, hopefully it doesn't take you 2 hours to get ready to do some lunges, but take it with the same level of care, because doing the session just to do it, if you're not in a good position, it doesn't translate you being able to do it when it actually matters. It's sort of a waste of time here. So take the extra time on your skill sessions and treat them like any other piece that you care just as much about, because for a lot of athletes, it isn't necessarily they don't have the requisite engine to get where they need to go, is that they're inefficient in the skills. And it doesn't matter because their engine's great, but their skills are so lacking, they have to work twice as hard as the person to their left or right. And that's the reason why they are stopping over and over and over again. I'm just thinking back to this is not necessarily the masters or a teen workout, but last year's lunge and handstand push-up workout. And people were like, psh, big deal, 10 strict handstand push-ups, what a joke.
What a troll that was. That was so great. So great.
30 overhead walking lunges there. And the people who are inefficient or had to fight against themselves to hold those dumbbells overhead were like, sick. 10 sets of one strict handstand push-ups. I can normally do 20 in a row. I'm doing singles.
If Caroline's struggling upside down in strict handstand push-ups, the rest of us are in deep shit.
Can never forget her face when she kicked up and did like 6 and her eyes were bigger Dennis place. She's like, what the hell? This is like,
she has 60 for breakfast.
Yeah, exactly. So again, just treat those sessions with as much care as you would with anything else, and you'll get something from them. And that'll make sure all the engine work that you're putting in on all your machines and everything else can then be translated when there's a skill element as well.
So there's 2 scenarios here with who's listening to this podcast. It's so important to us that if you are following already the teens and the masters, that you have a dedicated podcast where you can go in and just get excited. Like, listen to this and say, oh, wow, that's going to be really helpful for me. And, maybe that's a wheelhouse thing for me, but I know for me personally, I'm huge on, if it's wheelhouse for you, let's get you in first place in the world. Yeah. Like that sort of thing. So use this to get excited. Like, this time of year when you're really sort of putting all of the eggs into that basket, and no matter who you are, what level you're at, finding some form of going pro and taking this a little bit more seriously, use this podcast and this information just to get really excited about what's coming. And then on the other side, it's someone who's listening to this and maybe they don't follow Misfit Athletics and they're looking for another program. And what we're trying to do here is go in and say, hey, we got athletes on the podium in different divisions in the masters and the teens at the CrossFit Games every single year. And this is the best program that we've ever written to get athletes ready for semifinals and then go into the CrossFit Games. So I know for me, outside looking in, this is really exciting. It's really exciting to work with you guys on this program. And then just, when it comes to the teens and the masters, I get to, put my hands back, kick my feet up, and just watch people go in and crush. Well, I got some.
Yeah, I got some butterflies, but I know what you mean. I know what you're saying.
Yeah. It's just, it's so fun to watch. And hey, community's wide open. Come in and join us.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure that if you do join, be a part of Discord. Discord is so important during competition prep. You need to find your people to talk with. You need to be able to bounce questions off coaches and get answers, relatively quickly, all that stuff. And it's completely free. So discord.gg/Misfit Athletics. We've got a teens channel. We've got a masters channel. We've got, sort of the open chat and community and all that. So make sure that if you are new to the program and you're going to follow this, that you go into Discord and participate, because it is really helpful.
So much gold in that. There's so much chatter in how'd you do this and how you did that. There's so much extra learning that can take place outside of you're breathing heavy and you're trying to write notes on a whiteboard at the end of a workout. Like, there's a lot of value in using that community. And I think, it's still, while it's growing and getting bigger and bigger and people are doing a better job of communicating there, I still think it could be better. And the more that we communicate in there throughout the entire season, the better the entire community gets, and you all push each other to be your best. And instead of, a couple of masters in each category, it's like every category's got misfit athletes in there. And that's because of how valuable training partners are and how much someone else's experience can inform your experience and how much your experience can inform someone else's experience.
And if you're a masters athlete and you get on Discord and you have kids that are preteen or teen, you're going to be the coolest person in their eyes.
Very true. I'm going to put you guys on the spot to end.
Yes.
You both remote coach some of the best masters and teens in the world. A lot of people listening to this podcast do not have a remote coach. When they're going in, they've got this, 8 to 9 week program here. What advice do you have for somebody that doesn't have a remote coach to go in and attack this? I mean, honestly, especially if they're new and aren't used to the nuance of how we program.
The biggest thing I would say to an athlete is to make sure if you have a gap in an energy system, meaning you use a certain time domain you really don't like, that you prioritize that as your training every single day. So if you go into the programming and you see a workout and you're like, man, I freaking hate 4 to 8 minute workouts, and oh, beautiful, there's a 4 to 8 minute workout here. Make sure you dial that in and do those things first. Because again, when you are fresh at the beginning of your days, when you can kind of bite off more than you can chew there, can really push the intensity there. That would be my biggest piece of advice there. And then again, if you are someone who's not quite at the level of semifinals or games, don't get too wrapped up in too much volume. Air to do things as perfect as possible for yourself and make that your focus for the day. And if you do that, I think about someone like Roy Gamboa, who follows the programming here. And oftentimes with his job as a firefighter, he's doing 3 pieces on one day, 2 days off, then 1 piece, then 6 pieces. And he tells me that the days that he's able to do 1 or 2 or 3 pieces, but he doesn't do the best of his ability.
And he almost won the CrossFit Games last year.
Are the better of his training days and the days where he tries to jam everything into one. So don't get caught up in the noise of like, you have the anxiety of where it's only so many weeks away from my Super Bowl. You try to train a year's worth of training in a couple of weeks. That is the biggest mistake an athlete can make ahead of a competition.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll piggyback a little bit on the volume piece, but for masters, I think that it's just so essential that you do not overdo it with all of the other things that you have going on. Family, work, age is not, on your side in terms of recovery and all that kind of thing. So I would say, look at the volume first, look at the mandatory pieces, and don't pay attention to any of the noise of like, oh man, I didn't do this throughout the year, I need to make up for anything. No, stick to the plan during this time. Focus on quality and intensity. You're not going to be asked to do 18 pieces in a weekend for a competition like sometimes the open athletes might be doing. So the value is in not trying to compensate, is just looking at what is written there in the template. And then if you have, like, Sharp said, if you have some specific gaps or holes and that is better addressed by a certain piece, switch it out. Don't add it on. That's a huge thing here, because you can really, if you follow the peaking schedule, it's almost exacerbated for the masters that it's even more important to prepare them, but you can also really screw it up very easily by doing a little bit too much or not, having that focus.
I get to cheat a little bit and just reiterate things to finish up here. The masters community, the way that you move and the way that you strategize within workouts in competition, like literally your movement efficiency and how hard should I go here and what should these sets look like, you can jump pages on the leaderboard with that.
Yes.
Like, of course, every single athlete wants to move really well and sort of just get the most out of themselves because they did strategize properly. But in the masters community, very specifically, if you are able to execute on that, you are, again, going to move up pages. Now, what does that mean for your actual training? That means pay attention to the way that you move, and good old fashioned hypothesis, check it, do the work on, I think this is the strategy. It's okay if it was wrong. It's week 1.
Learn from it.
Right? Learn from it. Basically what we do is, here's the workout written. Here's what I want to do. Here's what I did. And if I did it again, here's how I would attack it. If you do that when you go through your pieces, like, I know it's sort of not counterintuitive, but the athlete mindset of like, okay, nerd, you want me to get out a pen and a paper? I'm going to go get after it. But that is just low hanging fruit. There's no central nervous system, or at least there's barely, in terms of brain energy of what you're doing. So like, really zero in on that and pay close attention to that. When it comes to, what Sherb talked about, with the teens and masters, I just really, what I heard him say was that thing that, the opponent within the middle of the week that looks like the worst workout possible. If your attitude is that's the greatest gift that you have within the week because it's where you can move the needle the most, man. And that's really the type of lesson where if you can start to feel that way when you're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, that is a really big deal. Yeah. So
it's the whole, like, I have to versus I get to mindset. Like, this is not, I have to go do this terrible couplet of thrusters and, I don't know, bar muscle ups. It's, oh man, last year, that was the one thing in the open that I was not proud of. I got stuck in that heavy thruster bar muscle up workout, and everybody around me that I thought were my peers were a little bit faster, and I couldn't figure out how they did it in 2 sets and I had to do it in 4. Like, that is how that happens. You have that opportunity and be like, you know what? This thing held me back last year. I'm not going to let it hold me back again. I'm going to think about the best way to do this. And if it doesn't go well this time, I can think about how I could make it better next time. And that is a huge shift in mindset, in like going away from being the victim and more of like, I'm the hero in my story, not the victim in my story, is what we should be telling ourselves if we're looking to do the best we can.
We do it.
We did it.
All right, ladies and gents, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Misfit Podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, one of the absolute best ways to support it is to head to any of these following websites, use these following codes, properfuel.co, use the code word Misfit, sharpentheaxeco.com, use your favorite athlete code. That helps Misfit Athletics, but it also helps you. You save money, and it helps the athlete because they get a little bit more money to go into their season. We've got a lot of traveling coming up. We've got a lot of, on the masters and teens level, are they sacrificing certain things within their life? So sharpentheaxeco.com, use your favorite athlete code. And of course, misfitathletics.com. If you're still on the fence about this program after this fantastic podcast, 2 weeks for free, you can get started. Again, March 6th is the beginning of the teens and masters semifinals prep. Go get after it. See you next week.